Soldier Mage King, Chapter 8. The Labyrinth of Gedref.
Merlin, you aren't coming, and that's final,
Arthur said, dragging her back into her room. Sir Leon trailed behind them, frowning. Oh, so Leon gets to go, but I don't, Merlin raged. She'd gotten Arthur another shot at removing the curse on Camelot he'd caused when he'd killed the unicorn, and he seemed determined to leave her behind. She wasn't having it. The minute he was out of sight, she'd go to Silas in the stables. He never asked why she needed a horse.
Leon's not coming either. He's here to guard your door and make sure you don't leave,
Arthur said, and Merlin bristled. Leon let out a long-suffering sigh.
Sire, she's right. It's not a good idea for you to go anywhere alone with the unrest in the kingdom.
The unrest caused by famine that was only going to get worse. See? Leon sees sense, Merlin snapped as Arthur finished pulling on his glove.
This is not up for debate, Merlin.
Arthur snapped and slammed her door, closed, shutting her in her own room. He turned to Leon.
You do not let her leave. Not until I get back and order otherwise. I don't care if you have to tie her up in there. She does not leave. I won't risk her again.
Arthur hissed to Leon, the sound of his voice almost lost under Merlin's swearing at them both through the door. Leon raised an eyebrow. Arthur shook his head. He clearly felt he didn't have time to explain. Leon took up a guard post on the bottom of the stairs, standing at attention, as Arthur nodded at him and rushed from the room. Leon, let me out. Merlin had opened her door. There wasn't a lock on it for Arthur to keep her here more effectively, but Leon knew Arthur didn't want her tossed in the dungeons just to keep her from following him.
I can't do that, Merlin.
Yes, you can. You can step aside.
Arthur would have my head. Please don't make me tie you up. I really don't want to,
Leon said, and Merlin fumed. Stupid, bloody, pig-headed knights. She tried to push past him, and he caught her around the waist and gently shoved her back into her room. She swore at him and closed her door again. A throat cleared behind him. Gaius was standing in the room, raising an eyebrow at him.
Arthur doesn't want her following him,
Leon explained, raising his voice to be heard over Merlin's raging. After a while, the noise died down to what sounded like either frustrated cleaning or Merlin throwing things around her room to pass the time. Leon honestly couldn't tell. Hours passed without incident. Since it seemed Leon would be staying, Gaius was preparing an extra plate, small though it was. Leon had taken a seat on the step up to Merlin's room since she hadn't tried to escape since her initial failed attempt. Silence filled the room, comfortable but a bit awkward. That was until Merlin's voice sounded. What are you doing here? She demanded. Leon shot to his feet. No one had passed them.
Arthur is to be tested, but a vital piece of the puzzle is missing.
Leon shoved the door to Merlin's room open as the male voice spoke a word in a language he didn't recognize.
Swepnu.
There was a tall old man standing in the room. He caught Merlin as she crumpled, her eyes falling closed. Her face had fallen slack as though she had fallen into a deep sleep. Leon drew his sword.
Put her down,
he called, his voice steady but threatening.
She is needed elsewhere,
the man said simply, and Leon lunged. A swirl of the man's white cloak covered both the sorcerer and Merlin, and they were gone, as if they had never been there at all. Leon swore. Arthur had expected more horrors in the labyrinth, something deadly. So far, the only thing deadly here was the lack of direction, though that was to be expected as a maze. But as he spotted the sea beyond the exit, he breathed out a sigh. If this was it, he'd overestimated the sorcerer Anhora. He should have known better. On the rocky shores by the seaside was a table. Anhora stood next to it. 2 chairs sat there, and one of them was already occupied. She was halfway sprawled across the table, head pillowed on her arms, eyes closed until Anhora spoke a word Arthur didn't recognize. Merlin bolted upright, looking around, panic in her eyes, battling confusion. Then she spotted Arthur, and comprehension lit her eyes as they flitted between him and Anhora. Arthur felt panic rolling in his guts.
Release her. I'll take your test, but not till she's released,
Arthur demanded, just keeping his voice from shaking.
That is not possible. Merlin is part of the test. Sit.
And Horace said, and Arthur only resisted the urge to rush forward and put his sword in his chest instead.
If you refuse the test, you fail, and Camelot will be destroyed.
Arthur sheathed his sword and sat across from Merlin.
Merlin, what are you doing here? I told Leon to keep an eye on you,
Arthur demanded. Hey, this isn't Leon's fault, or mine for once. I was kidnapped. Merlin admitted, and anger rose again.
She was needed,
Anhora insisted.
She was there with you when this all began. She advised you not to kill the unicorn. You did not listen. She is part of your test. Do you accept it?
Arthur remained silent for a moment before he nodded stiffly.
On the table before you are 2 goblets.
It was a mark of how surprised and terrified Arthur had been when he'd spotted Merlin that he hadn't noticed 2 plain silver goblets on the table.
One contains a harmless liquid, the other a deadly poison. All the liquid from both goblets must be drunk, but both of you are allowed to drink from only 1 goblet.
He stopped, and Arthur frowned, waiting for more.
What the bloody hell does that prove?
Arthur demanded, enraged.
What it proves is up to you.
And Horace said and fell silent. As they spoke, trying to work out the riddle, Arthur remembered the last time Merlin had drunk poison for him. He couldn't see her like that again, gasping, dying for him. Not when he could prevent it. Her solution was genius, and Arthur took full advantage of it. Arthur! She cried out, finally moving from the seat she'd been asleep in. His last view of the world was of tear-drenched blue eyes, and he smiled, knowing it was worth it.